Where did that transition come from? Where did you first... Hello, I'm Lewis Nichols, and you're watching...
So hello and welcome to the Lewis Nichols Show, and I'm really excited to bring on my next guest today. Let's say hello to Alan Fletcher. How are you?
I'm just short of terrific. Thank you, Lewis. It's great to speak to you.
Great to speak to you. Obviously, many of us know you here in the UK. Of course, it's got a huge Neighbours following, and you've been an icon, definitely in this country from not only just acting, but of course music as well. And we're going to be talking about music a little bit later. But I kind of wanted to start at the beginning for you, which is talking about where your love of acting actually came from. Did you kind of grow up around actors?
Oh, no, not really. No, none of my family were actors. Apparently, my grandfather was, but I never got to meet him. So there's no real connection. I just fell in love with acting when I was in school. There was something about it that attracted me to it. We did a school play in year 7 of them. But fundamentally, when I went to senior school, I had 2 wonderful English teachers who got me to do lots and lots and lots of plays. And that was it. I was just completely hooked. I went to university and ended up running the University Dramatic Society before I dropped out of uni to become professional. And that I went professional 46 years ago.
Wow. But obviously, we all know you as Dr. Carl Kennedy, of course, from Neighbours. But for you, when would you consider that moment to be where you got your big break, where you kind of think, yeah, this is happening now?
Well, that's interesting. I did, when I was in Perth, I served what was similar to an apprenticeship in the sense I did 21 plays in 3 years, most of them back to back. So that's where I got my grounding. And then I went into the theatre in Sydney, 4 more plays back to back, and touring. So I suppose really in the television world, it wasn't really until the mid-80s that I started in a show called Sword of Honour, which was a mini-series about the Vietnam War. And I think that was kind of like one of my career highlights and one of my more important shows. And from there, I went on to some pretty special TV shows. 1994, of course, Neighbours came calling. I had no idea that it was going to go as long as it did. It was a 1-year contract, and I thought this will be nice for a year. And it's turned into, well, almost 29 now.
Am I right in saying, though, but before you actually played the role of Carl, you were in the show prior as a different character?
That's right. I played a mechanic called Greg Cooper in about 1987. I was actually the 3-week guest character. I had to supervise Kylie Minogue's character, who of course Charlene was the apprentice mechanic. So she needed the supervising mechanic, and they were between mechanics. So they gave me a really sweet little 3-week storyline. I was actually working in the theatre at the time, so I worked Neighbours by day and theatre by night. And they asked me if I'd like to continue on in the following year as Greg Cooper, but I declined and decided I wanted to be in the theatre, which is good because 7 years later I came back as Dr. Carl.
It's crazy. You just mentioned then, but about Dr. Carl, you kind of thought it was going to be a 12-month thing at best, and then you've just said you look on now, nearly 30 years later, you're still playing that role. Do you ever step back and think that this is crazy because you didn't anticipate that whatsoever?
No, you couldn't. And of course, at that time, when Neighbours was in its early years, no television program in Australia had really run anything like Neighbours has, and Home and Away. I mean, Neighbours got to 37 years before it was axed and then revitalised. So now it's in its 39th year, and Home and Away is probably about 37, I think. But back in 1994, no show had ever gone that long, so there was no sense that you could ever be in an acting role that long. Of course, it's worthwhile saying that even though I played Dr. Carl Kennedy for 29 years or so, the character has changed so much over time. I've really kind of played 3 or 4 different incarnations of Dr. Carl as he's travelled through time.
What's your favourite? What one stands out for you as the favourite?
Well, I must say I do like the comic Carl, and he's more prominent in the later phases of Carl Kennedy. It was obviously great to do the high drama of the Izzy Hoyland and Sarah Beaumont stories, but all the big relationship stories. But I do love just having a bit of a lark I'm in the middle of a very funny comedy story at the moment on Neighbours, which I'm enjoying immensely, and I feel like it's almost in my home. So yeah, Carl's becoming a bit of a duffer in his later years, and I'm having a lot of fun with that.
Obviously, part of being in the UK, we call it a soap opera. We've got Coronation Street, EastEnders. It's having that really strong double act. Here in the UK, in Coronation Street, people will know Ken and Deirdre from the show. But with Neighbours, we've obviously got you and Susan. That's kind of the double act. You've got such a strong connection. So going back to when you first met and you realised that you were going to be on-screen husband and wife, was there that instant connection? Because you watch you now and even back then, and it's just like it clicked. The chemistry was there.
Well, Lewis, it was a twist of fate, because Jackie and I had played brother and sister for 3 months or so back in the early 80s on another show called Cop Shop, and we had a wonderful time developing those roles, and we realized we kind of worked the same way and so forth. So when we got to Neighbours, Jackie and I were completely on the same page. I was so excited that she was playing Susan Kennedy. And right from the get-go, we just fell straight into our characters and straight into performance with each other. And our wonderful children came along for the ride. I mean, the family just settled down so quickly, which is, I think, why it started to appeal to audiences fairly quickly. And that's what kept us on the show, I think, the fact that the audiences supported the Kennedys.
Do you think in casting Jackie, they did that based on the fact that you had worked together before? So there was that chemistry, or was it just coincidence?
I think it's just coincidence. I doubt that they would have been aware of it. It's just that we're lucky. I mean, it's not uncommon for you to work with actors you've worked with before here in Australia. It's a wonderful thing about the industry. If you've been lucky enough to do a lot of work, you'll often work with people. I mean, I had a new character came onto Neighbours the other day, and he came in and said hi, and I said, "Oh, hello, we worked together before, haven't we?" And he said, "Yes, 20 years ago, I played a doctor." So it's not uncommon to catch up with people you know.
Now, this question you've probably been asked so many times because of how long you've been on the show. But when you step back and you think of all of your storylines, is there one in particular that stands out as your favourite, or it has a special place kind of in your heart, essentially?
Well, yes, there is. There never used to be until episode 7,000 came along. Episode 7,000 was, as I mentioned before, I love the comedy. It was very much a comedic episode. This is an episode, it was actually self-contained because, of course, it was 7,000, and Carl found a scratch-it ticket worth £7,000, $7,000. He was over the moon, of course, but he lost that ticket, and he had to retrace his steps, all that he made all day, visiting every place in Erinsborough he'd been, of which there were many, until he got to Toadie's house, where Toadie was hosting a naturalist lunch for some clients who happened to be naturalists, and Carl had to nude up to go in to try and find his ticket in Toadie's house. He actually found that ticket stuck to Toadie's backside. It was one of my more hilarious moments on the show, certainly my favourite, and it'll live with me forever.
Have you ever done stand-up comedy or anything yourself? Because I mean, I've listened to your Christmas song, and it seems like it's something that is embedded in you as a person.
Yeah, no, I haven't done stand-up. I have got quite a lot of comedic songs. I wrote a song called "I've Got a Crush on Susie K," which is a bit of a comedic song about a fan who's passionate about Susan Kennedy. And I also reworked the lyrics for Smokey's "Living Next Door to Alice" to make it sleeping alongside of Susan. As well as in my own music, in Americana music, I've got some delightful new songs, one of which will release in January, called "The Love of Lager," which is again a comedic song, and "How Good Is Bed" is another comedic song. So I like to mix it up. I have some very serious ballads, but I do like to write some comedic songs that hopefully will be earworms and stick in people's heads.
I want to go back to last year when the news came out that Neighbours was being axed. I mean, this story, I remember, just broke the UK. It was on every major network going, because it's something that we've all known. I'm 30 years old, so I've grown up, obviously, with Neighbours. So it just came as such a shock. Going back to that moment when you first heard the news, what was your reaction to that? Because you must have been as shocked as we were.
Well, to be honest, we were aware that Channel 5 and Fremantle Media were in negotiations for the continuation of Neighbours, and it was taking quite a long time. And I suppose you see, as an actor, you're used to contracts ending all the time. And so you basically, rooster one day and a feather dusted the next. So you just accept the fact that a show might end. But it was, so I suppose we were kind of prepared, but it was still a huge shock because we realised that 200 people were thrown out of work at once. And the grief, the outpouring of grief from fans was really the biggest thing. That's the thing that really stuck with me. It's endless emails and messaging and so forth, and social media blowing up of people who are absolutely gutted, as you said, that their daily dose of Neighbours was disappearing. So it was for them that I actually felt the most. Luckily, of course, Amazon saw that outpouring of grief. They saw the number of people who actually watched the last episode of Neighbours and said, this is crazy. This show clearly has a huge audience, and they've picked it up. And they've been vindicated because it's doing incredibly well in the UK on Amazon Freebie.
Now, I believe you were one of the first people to know that the show was coming back. You were one of maybe, is it 4 people that were in that discussion?
Just the 4 of us, yeah.
How did you keep that quiet? Because I'm assuming you've got other cast members that are kind of aware something's going on, but they don't actually know.
Well, it was agony, Lewis. Jackie Woodburn, myself, Ryan Maloney, and Stephen Dennis were all contacted by the executive producer, asked if we would return. We all said yes. And then we set about recording some publicity, which would be released within a few days. Now, we, as a cast, had a massive WhatsApp group, and a couple of cast members started saying, hey, I'm hearing rumours. Is anybody else hearing any rumours about a bit major announcements going to be made and blah, blah, blah? And, of course, we had to be suspiciously silent. We were definitely sworn to secrecy. And of course, all those wonderful actors contacted us immediately. The commercials and everything went to air, and the promos on social media to go, I can't believe you kept that from us. But, of course, we had to. The hardest thing, too, is once we made the announcement with the Neighbours was back, everyone's on the WhatsApp going, have you been asked back? Have you been asked back? And, of course, it took time before the dust settled and we knew exactly who was going to be on the show.
Now, the UK seems to be a second home for you. I mean, you've spent a lot of time here, and a lot of time you've actually toured with your music. Again, a lot of people might not know watching this interview. They know you as Dr. Carl Kennedy, but they don't realise just how much of a passionate musician that you are. I know you fronted the band Waiting Room, and is it right you toured 7 times in 5 years?
It was actually 10, Lewis. It was 10 times in 8 years. Yes, the band was very successful. We even took the band to Iceland with it. Neighbours is huge. It was much loved by university students. They were avid viewers of Neighbours, and the band was playing basically sort of 80s and 90s and 2000s. In the end, indie rock, a lot of bands like the Fratellis and the Kaiser Chiefs and so forth got a look in, the Kooks. So it was a band that was set up very much for English audiences, and they loved it. The band worked for, I think, 12 years in Melbourne in residency at the Neighbours Night, which was hugely popular here with backpackers. So, it was a wonderful stint of time playing rock and roll, being a front man, and I really enjoyed it. But, everything comes to an end, and as it did. And now these days I've moved into what has always been my real passion, and that is country music and alternate country and Americana.
When I speak to some musicians on the show, some prefer just recording but not touring. But obviously, with how many tours you've been on, do you kind of thrive off that connection with the audience? Having them there and just building that connection with them?
There's no question. I mean, the reality of it is there is very little money in recorded music, to be honest, these days, of course, because with streaming. And touring is really the only way you get your message around about your music and attract people to come and see you. That's where you build a loyal audience. And so I toured in March this year with some colleagues from Australia. We had a 15-day tour of the UK, which was very successful. And coming back again in 2024 in July to do the same thing. But we'll be about 4 weeks at this time in July.
Well, we have your new Christmas single out now, and when you sent me this, it's really uplifting but funny at the same time, because you start listening to the lyrics and you think, oh, this is a nice, just a lovely Christmas song, and then you hear the comedy elements, which kind of takes you a little bit by surprise. So tell us about your new Christmas single. It's going to be a good Christmas, because this is just, it's brilliant.
Thank you. That's very kind. I have written 4 Christmas songs now. They're all different styles, and this time around, I decided I'd go for, besides country themed, which is where my heart is. I wanted to write a specifically Aussie themed Christmas song. There's been a few attempts at Aussie Christmas songs. There's not that many of them, but it does run to a fair bit of cliche. It basically sums up my sort of 40-odd Christmases that I've been through as a family, as well as adding in a little bit of cliche and a little bit of fantasy, just to give it a sense of an Aussie Christmas, because, an Aussie Christmas is fundamentally vastly different from what you experience in the UK. And there are some elements which are quite common in Australian Christmases. I mean, playing cricket on the backyard lawn is very common. Certainly some seafood on the barbecue, etc. So yeah, there are elements that a lot of families in Australia experience with Christmas. And of course, a lot of the elements in the song do apply to Christmas in the UK as well.
When it comes for you writing your songs, how does that process work for you? Do you kind of get an idea of a melody and then you record it so you don't forget? Like, how does the process work for you?
It can be a mix, Lewis. Sometimes a melody comes into your head and you actually just end up singing a melody into your phone without lyrics. And other times you have lyrics and you write your lyrics like it's almost a poem. And then you sit down and craft the music to it. Or I may sit down with my 2 incredible producers, Lachlan Bryan and Damien Caffarella, and workshop it with them. I've written quite a lot of my songs have actually been co-writes with Lachlan Bryan in particular, who's a master songwriter. So a lot of these songs are co-writes or collaborative efforts. Sometimes the song just comes to you in its complete entirety without any input from anybody. Like my song "The Point," for instance, from the Point album, is pretty much all mine. So it's a complete mix. You never really know where a song's going to come from. And to be honest, you never know how long it's going to take to finish. Sometimes I've got songs I started 2 years ago I haven't finished.
So you just got to wait until that moment, until you've got the whole package, and then you can put it together.
Yeah, that's right.
What's next for you now in regards to music? Because we've got your Christmas single, but obviously you mentioned there you've got lots going on next year as well. So tell us how that looks in regards to your music.
Right. Well, early on in 2024, we have the Tamworth Country Music Festival, which is the biggest festival for country music in Australia. It's a highlight. It's where all the awards are given out for country music, etc. I go to Tamworth every year, and I cannot wait to get back there again and play my music. I'll do some gigs in the state of New South Wales prior to that. Americana and country artists do a lot of regional touring in Australia. You basically spend a lot of time going from country town to country town, which is also, of course, what you do in the UK, because in a lot of times you're playing regional towns rather than major centres. And so I'll do touring in January, back to Neighbours solidly until I come over to the UK in July, and I'll be touring right throughout July. I'll be in London on the 11th and 19th. I'll be over in Norfolk and so forth, and up in Glasgow on the 2nd of August, and another big festival as well to be announced. So I'll pick, and then I'm just building a tour now for July. So I'm going to keep myself busy right through to the middle of the year and just after it. And also, I'm negotiating to see if I can get my one-man show up to Edinburgh Fringe this year. To see if I can, in 2024,
Wow.
see if I can make it. Yeah,
That'd be incredible. Obviously, the question would be now is you're on one of the biggest shows, that's out there, being Neighbours, and you've got the time to be in that. You've got the time to be releasing music, to tour. I also know that photography is also kind of a love of yours. So how do you fit all of this in? Because there's 24 hours in a day, and you do so much.
Yeah, it is true. It does seem as though I'm doing a lot. I mean, the thing is that a lot of stuff is actually done kind of while I'm at Neighbours, to be honest, because there are breaks in the day, and it's just being efficient with your time, making sure also that you craft out spare time is important. Otherwise, you just melt down. So even though it seems like I'm very, very busy, I'm trying to do it at the leisurely pace. I think my credo. The reason why I do get most of it done is I sit back and say, if something needs to be done, do it immediately. Don't wait for a deadline to turn up and you have to rush. You know what I mean? It's like everything's about making sure that you get it done when it needs to be done.
Well, Alan, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. We're going to play your track, and it's available in the link for those that are watching the video as well. But it's such a good song. Like you said, when you sent it to me, it took me, I was listening, and you start to hear the comedy elements, and then you just go from listening to quite an uplifting song to finding it hilarious. It's so good. So, yeah,
Thank you,
great
Lewis.
track.
Well, I hope people will have a listen to it. Of course, it's on my music streaming profiles, Alan Fletcher. And while you're there, have a listen to the other Chrissy songs as well. I actually do send out hard copies of these songs as well in a Christmas card. If people are interested, and they can nip over to my website to have a look at that if they wish.
Brett, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Pleasure, Lewis. Great to talk.